Hello again and welcome to DanWhiteBooks, the book review channel where we add insight into the worlds of literature for both those who do read and those who don't. Today's book review is a classical work of the 20th century. It's certainly a difficult one to digest, nonetheless it has some very important messages hidden within. Today I'll be reviewing The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Now from the off, I'm going to forewarn that I will be talking about some darker topics in this review, this in line with one of the main themes of this book, that being mental illness and depression. This topic may be hard for some, but I hope to raise awareness here and add clarity. I'll also be adding insight to the best of my ability at least into societal expectations and pressures for both men and women, and on how such can affect individuals in very damaging ways. A very tall order, I know, but let's get stuck into this one because there is a lot to talk about. The Bell Jar was originally published in 1963 under the pseudonym of Victoria Lucas. This was done to protect the names of real-life figures that certain characters are based on. The book now goes under the author's real name, this being Sylvia Plath. I mentioned in the introduction that this is a very hard book to read, and that's certainly true. It dives deep into the tide of human suffering, particularly one's own individual suffering. It is a book where you're scared to turn the next page, a book that bears a heavy emotional weight. It is in its simplest form a semi-biographical tale of a woman's descent into depression and suicide, and I suspect it is highly influenced by author Sylvia Plath's own experiences. Sylvia sadly committed suicide 1 month after this book's publication. Despite the perceived negative here, this book has a great deal to offer and is not one that I just plucked out from thin air. It is a well-known classical work, and for good reason. In parts it is difficult, almost cold. However, it is also necessary, giving you a unique perspective into the battles and pressures a person can face in our society, and particularly on how women from this time were very much pressured to conform to a certain way of being. The story starts off with central character Esther Greenwood working under a summer internship for a major fashion magazine in New York. Despite having a lot going for her, Esther carries around a feeling of emptiness and general dissatisfaction with living. She feels empty, and after attending events with other female colleagues, she slowly begins to isolate herself as nothing appears to give her any motivation. During this time, she speaks of her failed relationship with a man named Buddy Willard. Buddy had proposed to her, however, she felt him to be false and eventually broke up with him. Slowly as the book progresses, Esther's depression transcends to very dark levels. She begins to have a disconnect with her mind and body and finds herself in a constant battle as she fails to maintain order. As further bad news comes, she loses all desire to live and tries in numerous ways to end her life. She does not sleep, she does not eat, she no longer wishes to go on living and feels at the torment of her own flailing mind and body. Esther throughout this book is not treated as an individual. She's labelled as a woman and as such is told by society that she must behave in a manner in which a woman is supposed to. This book being set in the 1950s where certain ideas of what a man and a woman should be were very prevalent. Her sense of individuality is gone, lost in a deep ocean of societal beliefs. This further adds to her downward spiral where what society wants her to be is not what she desires. We can see this happening all the time with both men and women in modern society. Esther's mother even has an idea of what she wishes her daughter to become, but this is not in alignment with Esther's own desires and aspirations. Society can tell us how we should behave, what we should expect, even parents can do the same, but what's important is to pursue the fire that burns, not the twigs others have placed at your feet. Base your choices not on the pressure of society but on the want of yourself. Esther loses touch with what she wants to be and is never taken seriously or appreciated. The first 3 quarters of this book are incredibly touching and also painful to get through. They give you an insight into how each and every person is not just a label or a statistic. They have hopes, they have wants, they have dreams, and you can be sure they won't always align up with what others have as a vision of success. This book is written in a manner that is rather beautiful in parts. Despite all the horror and despair that is personified through the main character, the descriptions, metaphors and similes are honestly some of the best I've ever come across, and by some way. You're not only reading a tragedy when turning these pages, you are reading a deep and poetic expression of one's own suffering and mental hardship. It is much like a great piece of horror in that as a whole it's dark, cold and terrifying, but deeper down to the level of the individual descriptions there is a beautiful conveyance of language that is used to draw empathy to the main character's heartbreaking perspective and to offer Sylvia Plath's own suffering. So while this book is disturbing in parts, at the same time it is a piece of art, offering to the world an eye into a reality of helplessness, depression and despair, a view where the lights start to dim and then go out. What I've talked about in this book review is not the full picture. There is hope in this work, but it does walk through the paling light to get there. Sylvia Plath is a well-known poet, and I can see why. She creates such wondrous descriptions and metaphors in her work. The very title denotes the bell jar that the character feels is enclosing around her whenever she is depressed. All of her thoughts and ideas become clouded and dark when the bell jar descends. So a hard book. I won't lie, this isn't going to be for everyone, but as I've previously mentioned, it is very, very well written and there is a lot you can take away from it. When you look at a painting, it may be sad to behold, particularly if the work denotes something horrific or unsettling, but it is the beauty of that betrayal that causes you to admire it, and that's very much how I feel about this book. It does what it sets out to do very well. It drops you into the tale of a woman who is losing touch with herself and descending steeply into depression. So with all things considered, I would rate this book a 90 out of 100. I'd advise caution, but also understanding when picking this up. My friends, thank you very much again for watching. This is a hard book to read. It's quite dark in parts. It's very sad. It touches on some darker topics, as I said, but it's written so well. It's hard for me to kind of define it. The descriptions and similes in this book and metaphors are far beyond anything I'd be capable of, and are far beyond what I've seen in other writers. They were just stunning in some parts. That whole idea about the bell jar is one of them, but there are many more. They're just all throughout this work, just so easily sprinkled everywhere, and each being so just great to behold and great to read. So all that's left to do is bid you a very farewell. Keep safe out there. I will see you again soon for another book review. Bye bye.